Before we went on, you mentioned that I wrote something for Substack yesterday. I wrote a couple this week, but I actually the thing I wrote on Substack, which is I have a Substack called Need to Know, which people can go and look up if they're interested. Um, uh, a
Subscribe.
lot of it subscribe. Well, that's nice of you to say, but people will uh, who listen to this podcast will see a lot of the things that I was saying are things that have come out of the podcast, which essentially says that the column says this: we're in a critical moment. The Republicans have been scorched earth for a long time. Mitch McConnell didn't care about rules in the Senate to, get the Supreme Court that he wanted. The White House, the Department of Justice now say the president gets to pick which laws he's going to enforce or not. They've got a Supreme Court which rules for Republicans and not for Democrats. And Democrats for a long time have been sort of following this. Well, we're going to play by the Marquis of Queensberry rules, and Michelle Obama says when they go low, we go high, and all this other kind of stuff. And the result is that we're on the verge of losing our democracy. And my theory is we've got to come back hard against these people, and we have to stop telling ourselves, well, if we do that, they may overreact. They had a fucking coup. They've taken, they're on the verge of a dictatorship. And so, I've said a few things. Some of them are things you and I've talked about. You got to change the Supreme Court. You got to change the rules in the Senate. Maybe you've got to change the rules in the House. Maybe you've got to add a couple of states to the mix. You've got to prosecute people who break the law. You've got to put in place laws that make corruption illegal. You've got to federally finance elections. You've got to do a whole bunch of things because if you don't fix it and you just get back into this incremental politics as usual thing, we're going to lose every time because they're going scorched earth, and we've got leadership in the House and Senate that wants to write a vigorously worded um, social media post.
Spot on. And I think it points out as well some of the great weaknesses in the culture of Democrats and in their own leadership. One part of it is and was, well, they may behave horribly and violate laws, norms, rules, and even the Constitution. But when we come in, we will behave honorably, and the American people will see the difference. And we don't have to do anything more than just behaving honorably. And we know where that got us. It got us to a point where Donald Trump was not held accountable for his violations of the law and Constitution because we had an attorney general who was going to play by old rules in a new system. It got us a second Trump term because Joe Biden behaved like a traditional president, sending out aid to red states. In fact, passing a law, the Inflation Reduction Act, that gave more benefits to red states and districts than it did to blue states, believing that that's what a president does and nobody knows it or cares about it. And then they come in and do even more violence to what's going on. And now I was talking today with a prominent House Democrat about countering this belief that there's one big, beautiful bill, or as we would call it, one big, massive pile of excrement, as it begins to hit the American people, as it already has with the horrific flooding and tragedy in Texas, as we're going to see over and over again as they eliminate all of the safeguards and the safety net, including public safety, from people. Uh, you have far too many Democrats who believe that, well, people will see this, they will be unmasked, and we can romp to victory. There's no guarantee that people will see it that way because the right wing has a really powerful wind machine, and we got nothing. And unless we fight fire with fire, use hardball against them, make it clear and build our own communications network to reach that large share of people who don't pay any attention, who aren't going to know who's responsible for this stuff, then they may prevail again even after they've blown up the economy and killed large numbers of Americans and shredded every single bit of decency that we've had through government and the society. And, the 25 things that you're talking about are a powerful roadmap. Many of them have to wait unless and until Democrats are in power again, and none of it will happen unless they change the rules. But it also has to be the case that if we reach a point, let's say in 2029, where Democrats prevail and have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, there are a couple of things that have to happen. One, as you note, they're going to have to change the filibuster so that they can actually do something, because Republicans will again stymie them. And Republicans have already opened the door for doing this by manipulating the so called reconciliation process. But the second thing is the next president is going to have to use many of the weapons that Trump has employed, partly because the Supreme Court gave him not just immunity, but all of the trappings of a unitary executive, allowing him now, for example, to fire federal employees almost at will. And Democrats are going to have to clean house. And after that, but only after that, try and build in some safeguards so that the next Trump can't do it again. That isn't going to be easy, but I don't see any great signs that we have potential leaders or presidential candidates out there who truly understand this.
Yeah, I don't. I certainly don't either. And I would say that the 25 things I listed, one could have listed 100. Um, and literally, as I was right, I think it took me, a half an hour to come up with the 25 things that I was talking about. Um, Half of them are structural things, or that love the kind you talked about. The other half are owning being Democrats and doing what's right for the American people. Because not only do we sort of lose a
Yes.
lot of these incremental, there's a lot of these sort of put battles on structural things, but like, for example, the, Trump is cutting away healthcare coverage from everybody. That's an opportunity to say, something, everybody should have healthcare coverage. Not some people, not incremental, not that we've been wrong about this. Every other country in the world gives everybody healthcare coverage. We are Democrats. We should give it. And when the Republicans say, oh no, that's socialist medicine, you just got to tune it out. Say, no, it's not. That's the way the world works. This is what we want to do for people. We want to own this. We want to own protecting the environment. We want to own rational gun control laws. We want to own fair taxes. I would love to see a Democrat who got out there and said, you want to know something? I want to balance the budget. We've done it before. We're going to do it again. You know how we're going to do it? Fair tax code. You know what kind of crazy radical I'm going to take a page out of? Eisenhower. Eisenhower administration tax codes, where the people at the top of the tax code bore some heavier responsibility, and we use that to balance the budget and pay for things. We don't need to spend $1 trillion a year on defense when that's more than the next 8 countries added up together. We can cut 10 or 20% and use that for social programs, or use that for international aid programs that achieve more for our defense than the defense programs do. But all I'm saying is part of it's structural, and part of it's just owning democratic policies and saying, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, we, we're not going to run away from that. We're for that. We're for a society where everybody has a shot. We recognize immigrants have contributed to our society. Our path to victory is not, as some Democrats saying, well, let's do Republican light on this and throw lots and lots of people in jail and show how tough we are. Our path is to be ourselves and be different and do the right thing on these things. And that, the country was built by immigrants, your relatives, my relatives, the relatives of everybody, including Donald Trump, were immigrants. And so part of it is to just have the courage of our convictions too.
That is also true, oh so true. And I wish I were more optimistic that that will happen. I do think we're actually having an interesting, not entirely constructive debate, partially constructive, over this New York mayoral election and Mamdani. And it's constructive in a couple of ways. One is it clearly reflected a public desire for a new generation of leaders. And I'm never going to criticize many of the older generation. I think people like Nancy Pelosi, Rosa DeLauro, many others who've served for a long time are still passionate fighters with it. They have experience and depth to go along with it. I don't want to challenge them in primaries or force them out, but I think we have to look to a younger generation in part so that we can establish for voters that the Democratic Party that so many didn't like or thought wasn't serving their own interests is turning a page. That is what, in part, that election reflected. It also reflected, I think, the genius of a candidate who knew how to communicate to larger groups of voters and use that issue of affordability, which is not just a New York City issue. We have to find ways to take messages that incorporate all the values that you said, including DEI, including just fundamental decency surrounding, say, LGBTQ people and trans people, and appeal to that fundamental level of decency, but also to show that this is not a party that's just going to seize on slogans because that's how we can get back in power. It can't be a party that, if we do have reasonably fair elections in 2026 in the midterms, and Democrats do extremely well, that believe that they've got the answers, because that'll be a rejection of what's there, but we've got to do more than that going forward. Um, so there's a lot to think about and to deal with. And we're starting to see, I think, a little bit of the right focus here to not just deal with the triage now of getting through this fight without losing it, because all of a sudden, in a blink, we've got a full on totalitarian or seriously authoritarian police state with people running around with masks and hoodies, just picking up people at random or picking up those who criticize the dear leader and throwing them in fetid hellhole concentration camps, not just immigrants. Um, that if we can emerge on the other side of this, we have to have the right themes and ones you suggested done by the right people in the right way and reaching the right audiences.
Right. And use this moment as a moment of
Yeah,
opportunity and say to
exactly.
yourself, look at their extremism on healthcare. Look at their extremism on the environment. Look at their extremism on DEI. Look at their extremism on immigration. Look at their extremism on fiscal policy. Look at their extremism on foreign policy. Look at their extremism on these things and see how much it hurts. See the damage it's causing and saying, no, we are going to not go and split the difference with them. We are going to go to the path that is going to do the best things for the American people. And I think you said it extremely well. And I will vote for you, Norm. I still think that the 2028 election, you've got a legitimate chance to be our next presidential candidate. And if the people who listen to words matter follow you on the contrarian and follow you around in the aisles of the social Safeway or wherever you do your shopping, if those people all line up and they support you, I think we could start a grassroots movement right here.
Ornstein Rothkopf in 2028. Okay.
I'm happy to be a running
Yeah.
mate. I but I would also probably be the houseboy at the White House if you ask.